Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am Sinema77, horror and cult film lover. I'm back with another movie review. Now, if you remember, last year I reviewed the 1996 erotic vampire thriller, uh, Embrace of the Vampire, starring Alyssa Milano. And yeah, this one was, you know, it was kind of controversial when it first came out, but I mean, this movie, it became a really big cult classic. A lot of it because of Alyssa Milano being the star, and word getting out that you get to see Alyssa Milano do explicit nudity, and we see her face and body in the same shot, and we know that it's her. It's not a stunt double, and that's ultimately what led to this movie becoming the cult classic that it is. And a lot of people just really wanted to see that. It's like Alyssa Milano is now, she's a grown woman. She's not the teenage star from TV that we knew her as. So everybody wanted to see that. So now, see, here's the thing. Like I said, the movie came out, it gained a cult following, it became something of a moderate success. And then about 17 years later, in 2013, they decided we needed a remake of this movie, which, aside from maybe like Hollywood, nobody else really thought that, but they decided we needed a remake, so we got one. Embrace of the Vampire unrated, and I just watched this a little while ago. I've been meaning to get around to this a lot sooner, just never did. And honestly, it's okay, but I do have some problems with it, and yeah, we're gonna get into that right now. So the movie, now, you don't have a big name star in this. You have more of an unknown actress named Sharon Hinnendael, who this is her right here. She ends up playing the role of Charlotte in this movie. That's the character that Alyssa Milano played in the original movie. Now, I mean, she's gorgeous and beautiful, and yeah, she's very nice to look at. Now, the story is slightly differs from the original movie. In the original movie was kind of more like an updated erotic version of Dracula. That's kind of what it was meant to be. In the original movie, you had this handsome young man who gets turned into a vampire. He's seduced by three beautiful women. He gets turned into a vampire, and then centuries later, he discovers Charlotte going to this university, played by Alyssa Milano, and she's basically, he sees her as the reincarnation of his lost love, and he tries to seduce her into becoming a vampire, even though she's got a boyfriend named Chris. And then so basically it results in a love triangle, and Chris has to basically run a race against time to try to save Charlotte and keep her from becoming a vampire for forever. Now, the plot here differs because in the beginning of the movie, we see just people being randomly attacked by vampires, and the vampires are much more evil looking. They're not seductive like they were in the original movie. And that's one thing you're going to kind of notice that's a difference between the original movie and the remake, is that the original movie was more interested in being kind of sexy and erotic and things like that, where the remake really goes for more of a horror movie tone. So there's that. But we see this family being attacked by vampires. Then we cut to modern day, and we see Charlotte, played by Sharon here. She's going to her first day of college, and turns out she's, similar to Alyssa Milano's character in the original movie. She's been going to kind of like an all girl Catholic school most of her life, so she's kind of very naive. She's very virginal, things like that. And she gets to this college, and she meets her roommate, and uh, the roommate has a friend, Eliza, and it turns out that's kind of one of the big problems, though, with this movie is, yeah, a lot of the girls in this movie are kind of very snotty and stuck up, and it's like they look good, but they're not particularly likable. So some of the actresses in this movie kind of tend to be annoying. Um, but Charlotte here, yeah, here's the problem. It's like, she gets to this college, and she's having to deal with the fact that, she's there on a full scholarship. So, and she's taking mythology classes. She's taking fencing classes, things like that. And she's got a ton of pressure on her, and she's got a lot going on in her life and everything. And so, she decides she needs to get a job to pay for school and things like that. So she takes she takes a job working as a barista in a coffee shop, kind of a Starbucks coffee shop. Now, the difference between this and the original movie is here she meets Chris, who becomes her love interest. And in the original movie, Chris was already her boyfriend, and he had been dating her for a long time, and he had been not really rapey, but he had been suggesting on numerous occasions he really would like for them to have sex. But her being a virgin and everything, and if I remember correctly, it was either her 18th or her 21st birthday. It was one of those two in the original movie that the idea they were going to wait till it was her birthday, and then she was going to celebrate by losing her virginity, things like that to that point. But anyway, so yeah, it's different in this movie. So she meets Chris, and he takes a liking to her, and she's taking her class, and she meets the professor, and essentially what ends up happening, which I think was kind of a real downfall with this movie, was the fact that it seems like the vampire storyline kind of really becomes more of an afterthought. It's almost like whoever wrote the script. Uh, let's see here. Andrew Aaron and Sheldon Roper. It seems like when they were writing the script, it seemed like they kind of forgot that they were writing an erotic vampire movie, and they were writing more of a psychological film, like a psychological horror slash drama, because that's kind of how this movie plays out. It plays out more like this woman, she goes to school, and she's trying to deal with basically like schizophrenia. She's trying to deal with mental problems and things like that, and so she gets there, and she's trying to deal with all these things, and it just seems like the vampires just become like they're hardly even there. Isn't like the first couple of acts, I mean, you don't really see anything. Charlotte, it turns out she gets on the fencing team. Turns out she's really good at it, which of course pisses off and infuriates the other girls. And so they decide that they're going to have like basically kind of like hazing for the girls on the fencing team. And so they make them all stand on chairs, and they make them start doing shots. And if they do something wrong that they don't approve of, they have to remove an article of clothing, which sounds like it could be a sexy idea, but it's not handled very well. It's just more just kind of comes off more just women being mean to each other and things. Even though we do get basically what's recalled to the original movie, the one scene that, quite honestly, is like if you're going into this movie for the erotic aspect of this film, this is basically the one scene in the whole movie you really need to see. Is the scene where this girl, she takes Charlotte back to not Charlotte's room, but her room, and because Charlotte is drunk, and she's not really knowing where she is. Basically, this girl decides to take advantage of her, and you get the nudity, and you get this kind of really enticing girl on girl scene. But at the same time, it's not 100% enticing, not as it was in the first movie between Charlotte Lewis and Alyssa Milano, because in the original movie, Alyssa Milano, her character is not drunk, and she kind of goes along with it and everything up until she hits her breaking point and then decides she's not into it anymore. But she is aware of what's going on. She's aware that she's being seduced by a woman and things like that. And like I said, up to a point, she's going along with it. In this version of the movie, it's not as sexy, because you realize that Charlotte, her character, she is impaired because of alcohol, and she's not really in the position to make good judgments. So even though everybody's like, well, dude, that's college. That's what girls at college do. They make bad choices and things. So I understand that, but even still, just the idea behind it. But it turns out a lot of this stuff is meaningless. And while in the original movie, while there was a lot of scenes of Charlotte having all these sexual fantasies, like at one point she's having this fantasy where she's nude and she's kind of down, kind of like strapped down, and she sees Chris nibbling on one breast. She sees Charlotte Lewis's character nibbling on her other breast, and then the vampire appears, and he's taking her, basically. You have these more erotic images, whereas in this movie the eroticism is very, very toned down. like I said, it ends up kind of going more towards more like jump scares and things like that. But yeah, it just doesn't really amount to much. Not like it did in the original movie. Like I said, this movie kind of delves more into horror film territory. And so, Charlotte, she's losing her grip on reality, like I said, and she's being told lies by Eliza, like Chris. At one point, he's being very sweet and very charming to her and everything else, and he's talking about the he and his friends are going to go on a camping trip. He'd love it if she would come along. And at first, she's like, "Yeah, I think so. If I'm not busy, I don't have anything to do, I'll come with you guys." And then, Eliza sees that she's talking to Chris. And so Eliza decides she wants to be the bitch and she wants to just mess with her. So she ends up telling her about, yeah, Chris has a bet, because she's a virgin, that he bet that he could, bag her in just a few days and everything, and get her good and knock and laid up and all that stuff. And so so there's a little bit of a confrontation there between her and Chris. And at the same time, Charlotte's also kind of developing something of a crush on the teacher who is her fencing teacher, but at the same time, he's also her mythology teacher, and he's teaching them about vampires and things like that. I guess the idea is they do that just to kind of keep it in there that, yeah, this is a vampire movie, even though we hardly see any vampire action really. Like in the original movie, we saw the scene where Charlotte, Alyssa Milano's character, she goes to the party and she gets a little drunk, and this guy's about ready to date rape her, and then the vampire comes along and kills the guy, basically being her protector. But yeah, but in this movie, you don't really have that so much. This one here is just more like a lot of jump scares and things like that, and then we're introduced to this woman who, she comes into the coffee shop, and she's, telling Charlotte about, yeah, I know all about vampires and stuff. Come and see me. And so Charlotte does, and she explains to her, because she's wearing this necklace. And no, you can't see it here, but she's always wearing like this necklace and everything. And, she's explained that, basically it's kind of like she's been prophesized to become a vampire hunter, which is definitely a change from the original movie. And the idea is that he wants to kill her and feed off of her, and basically he will become human if he feeds off of her and drinks her virgin blood, that he will become human again, but she will be damned to eternity in hell if she lets him go through with it. And she does what any normal person would do. She just gives up on the idea. But the woman who tells her the prophecy is immediately killed afterwards. And of course, big surprise, hey, guess what? We're heading towards the third act. Turns out, yeah, we need a vampire. So it turns out that you have a couple of red herrings. There is this guy who's sort of like the dean of the college in a way, or kind of like a guidance counselor, that he kind of looks weird, and he's always kind of lurking in the background, kind of always like watching over Charlotte and things like that. So obviously he's meant to be an attempt at being a red herring for being the vampire. But of course, hey, guess what? Big surprise. It turns out that the instructor, sorry, spoilers here, but the instructor, the teacher, he's the vampire. And so at one point Charlotte decides she's just going to forget all of this stuff, forget everything she's been told, forget about, even though she's seen proof that things are going wrong here, like she'll go to sleep in her bed and then she'll wake up like outside the building, things like that, which was a nod to the original movie. But, she decides she finds out Eliza's full of bullshit about everything she'd been saying about Chris. So she decides she wants to go ahead and go with them on the camping trip. So you got Chris and Charlotte, Eliza and her boyfriend, and the roommate and her boyfriend. Well, the roommate and the boyfriend, they go off and they pretty much get killed off camera. We don't see it. The guy that Eliza's with, he pretty much just disappears. And Eliza, she gets bitten on the neck, and he's, it's a chance to get it's meant to be erotic, but it's, just a topless shot of a woman being sucked on by a vampire. And the one thing I was thinking about this, it's in this movie, but I remember watching the Dracula series on Netflix the other day. It had the same thing, and it just made me wonder. It's like, why is it like in a lot of these vampire movies? Why is it like when vampires are always in there talking about how precious blood is to them and they need it so much. And, it's like, I mean, I know it's for gore. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand it's for gore. That's the whole point, but it's to be bloody and gory and things like that. But you sit there and think about it, it's like, if a vampire is biting you on the neck, why do they just let all the blood just run out of you and basically let you bleed to death? And that's pretty much what it is. And then when the vampire comes up, it's all like he's not, he's supposed to be drinking the blood, but it just seems like he's just always spitting it all out. And that's kind of what it looks like here too. It's just, so you sit there, it's like, why are you even doing all this if you're not going to drink the blood? It just seems like you're not even drinking it. Just a pet peeve I have with some vampire movies, but anyway, so Charlotte and her boy, Charlotte and Chris, they make their way into the forest, and Charlotte, she's wearing this tight little red dress, and to try to get a little more eroticism into the story, she and Chris decide that she wants to go all the way with him, and so he starts to seduce her, and then they start hearing noises and things, and basically Chris is pulled off into the darkness, and that's it. I mean, obviously he's pretty much killed. We never see him again, but so anyway, so the next day you got Charlotte. She's upset. She's crying, which that's one thing I got to admit about the actress, Sharon Hinnendael. If you watch this movie, I kind of feel bad for her because it's almost like every scene she's in this movie, she's almost constantly crying. And I mean, that's a sign of a good actress when they can emote like that, that they can cry on, the director's like cry and they can do that, but it just seems like that's the majority of her screen time. She's always crying. And I hate to say it, she either looks like she's always ready to either pass out or she looks like she's ready to just vomit, but, I mean, she's a gorgeous woman and everything. I mean, you saw the pictures, but, but anyway, so we're getting to the third act. Charlotte decides she's going to go and confront the vampire, and, he's about ready to seduce her. It turns out she's got like a cross, with a pointed end in her boot, and she stabs him, but she gets bit. And so the vampire, and it turns out it's really weird for a guy who's a vampire. He has the most flimsiest curtains in his home, because all she does is just barely pull this flimsy ass curtain back, and he's roasted to a crisp, pretty much. So that was one thing. It's calling, you're a vampire. You think you might want to like block out your windows a little bit better to keep the sunlight from coming in instead of just, this really flimsy curtain. Just me, I don't know. It's like, but so anyway, so the movie pretty much ends. You got Charlotte. She's laying on the floor. She's been bit. We don't really know what her fate is. You don't know if like she's going to basically become like a female version of Blade, where she's like half human, half vampire. She's going to go hunt vampires now, or it's very vague. The ending of the movie is very vague, and but overall, this movie, it's not a bad film, but compared to the original movie, it's kind of really unnecessary. We really didn't need it. Or it kind of feels more like a movie. You could have just called it something else besides Embrace of the Vampire, because like I said, this one plays up more of the horror aspect than it does the eroticism. And that's kind of what made, and that's the thing. That's one of the reasons too, why I think this movie just kind of slipped under the radar compared to the original movie, because you have a lot of actors and actresses in this movie that nobody knows. These are all pretty much unknown actors and actresses. Maybe you might have seen somebody in here you might have seen like maybe in an episode of a TV show, but that's about it. What ended up making this movie the cult hit that it became was the fact that you had some name actors and actresses in this movie. You had Alyssa Milano, who's a big name TV star. You had Jordan Ladd, Cheryl Ladd's daughter, who, we all know Jordan Ladd from, like Death Proof and Cabin Fever and movies like that. You got, let's see here. Jennifer Tilly makes an appearance in this movie. Charlotte Lewis, she's a well-known actress. You got, Martin Kemp, who's, well-known British actor. He was in movies like The Craze, and he was on an episode of Tales from the Crypt and things like that. So you got some known talent in this movie. That's one of the things. This movie really, because you don't know anybody in here, this movie's not really a draw. Now, they're all pretty people, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to be good actors or give a good performance. I will say, though, that Sharon Hinnendael, she does do a good job, despite the fact that the majority of her characters, she spends mostly just sobbing and crying and, like I said, looking really sick. And a lot of it, too, is just, I think it kind of didn't really hit the mark because, like I said, this movie plays more like The movie seems much more like a psychological drama slash horror movie. It seems more like this story of a woman who's losing her grip on reality and trying to deal with things. For an erotic film, you got maybe a couple of scenes that are erotic. The rest of the movie is kind of really tame and not really. If you're going into this hoping for eroticism, there's not, except for those couple of scenes. You don't really. There's a scene with Charlotte and the girl in the room, and then there's a scene with her and Chris where they start to make love in the woods. That's about it. The rest of the movie is kind of like whatever quote unquote eroticism there is. It's just really kind of tame and not much to it. Um, and like I said, this movie, and it does. It kind of feels like the vampires almost feel like an afterthought at some point. Like I said, more of the movie's just about Charlotte, and then finally it seems like they're getting to the third act, and it seemed like the writers all of a sudden remember, oh, wait a minute, this is a vampire movie. We need to get a vampire. Who should be the vampire? Should Chris be? No, because we see him out in the data. You know what? We'll make the professor the vampire. Yeah, we need to hurry up because we got to get a vampire in this. But overall, it's an entertaining movie. It's not a terrible movie, but I got to be honest. I mean, if you just want like a good vampire movie, you could do worse, but you could do a lot better. But if you're going for eroticism, really, this is the one you need. This one here is really the one to go for. And yeah, I mean, just Alyssa Milano looks so good in that movie, and you know, so yeah, I would definitely say, yeah, I pretty much recommend this one over the remake. But the remake, it's not terrible, but it's just not great either. It's not something to write home about, but it's okay. But anyway, I thought it's halfway decent. But like I said, just needed more vampires, needed more eroticism. So anyway, that's pretty much going to do it. So if anybody took the time to watch all this, I thank you for doing it. I appreciate you for doing it. I also hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. There'll be videos posted. And until then, this is Sinema77, horror and cult film lover, wishing you a good night and take care. Bye bye.